Let's go ahead and start with our guest for today, Mike Hoffay.
Hello, everyone. Great to be with you in this format and with this group. I've known Alan for a great long time. Have not known Michael for near as long, but spent a little bit of time with him as well. Just a quick little bit of background on me. I have been in the retail industry for well over 20 years, working in support of this great place we call retail. I have worked with retailers, brands, print service providers, merchandising, and display companies, really focused primarily around the in-store experience and really trying to increase sales within the store. So that's my background. I've had many roles: business development, management, all kinds of different levels, and have had all kinds of levels of both customer experience as well as supplies on the supply side as well. Back to you.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Well, thank you again for being here, Mike. We're super excited to have you. Love to have another voice of expertise and industry knowledge available. So thanks again for being here. And everybody knows and loves Alan, but Alan, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hey, everyone. My name's Alan Plunkett. I'm sure pretty much, like Mike said, everybody knows me. 30 years industry experience in substrates, with the last 10, almost 15 years working with North America's largest retailers on helping them to match the right substrate up with the campaigns that they're running. And I've known Mike for the entire time I've been in retail. I've known Mike, and really glad to have him on with us today. He's one of my go-to people in the entire industry. He's a good friend and an absolute wealth of knowledge for everything going on in retail. So really glad you're here today, Mike.
Thanks, man.
Well, to jump right in, Alan, if you don't mind, you want to take everybody through what the three phases are, maybe just kind of bring us up to speed, and I'll let you and Michael kind of run with it from there.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll just do a quick overview. The idea is there's really three phases to what has been happening. The names, I'm finding out, it was about a month ago that we brought this out. We came up with the naming of the three phases. One of them was a complete miss, and one of them actually ended up being pretty well. So we want to go through and talk about the three phases. The first phase that we're coming out of is the distress phase. We won't spend a whole lot of time talking about that. We'll just go over it briefly because we've all unfortunately been living it for the last 3 months. And personally, I like to live through the windshield and not look through the rearview mirror, but it's important to see what we've come through. The second phase that actually ended up being named fairly well is Re-emergence and Discovery. That's the phase we've just broken into as states are opening up. Pretty much everything's open now. And then we'll finish up by talking about what the brave new world, and I put a new normal on there, finding out real quickly that new normal is a name of the past. And Mike Hoffay, you had a better name for it you came up with in the month since we've done it?
Yeah, I'll talk about it too, but the next normal. I think it's next because it's going to be a bunch of stages.
Yeah, the new normal just doesn't fit anymore. When we started it, it was kind of a phrase, but so totally whipped on that one. But next normal, we'll talk about that, and that's a big enigma right now, but we'll talk about what we're seeing with that. And on the first part, I wanted to jump in on that distress phase that we've been through. It started, depending on where you live, Chris Markle up in Seattle, they locked down a little bit earlier than some other places. Here in Ohio, it was March. But basically 3 months of real turmoil, everything from complete closures, depending on what your business is. If it's a dine-in restaurant, complete closures, or takeout, at least major disruption. We lived through the furloughs and the layoff. And then the people having to go to working from home and the adjustments retail had to make at that point. And then we went into a little phase where there was a contingency plan for a contingency plan. In case that contingency plan doesn't work, then we'll go to this plan. And for 2 or 3 weeks, that's all retail was doing, was just planning for everything. And it is each milestone passed off. They missed it. And then towards the end of the distress phase, we could talk about numbers towards the end if you want. Some of the 80%, 90% down, the numbers in March and April and retail in general were awful. But then towards the end of it, the stress phase, and as states begin to open up, it's been a little bit more disjointed, reopening of states than people expected in the time manner. But just some of the challenges that that retailers had to go through, from everything from, you had to realize that their stores have been closed for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and the cleaning procedures that had to go on in there. Things like the inventory that they had purchased that was still inside the store environments were now outdated. What are they going to do with the inventory? What are they going to do for customer safety and employee safety? We'll talk about that. And then even things like logistic methods. If you've got a retail establishment that operates in 4 states, and you've got a distribution hub in one of those states, and 2 of the states are open, but the distribution hub is closed. Now you've got to completely reinvent your distribution model and your logistic model. So the distress phase, not only economically was it a disaster, but it's led to what ends up being kind of appropriately named the phase that we're entering into is a discovery phase, where Mike can talk about, I'm going to hand it off to him in just one second, how retailers and PSPs are having to completely reinvent themselves and different ways of going to market, different ways of doing business with each other as we go into this discovery phase. And I'll hand it off to Mike for some of those thoughts.
Yeah, as Alan mentioned, the the next new is I'm kind of looking at it as I really believe that we're going to have a lot of phases of new. It's certainly a new place that we're in, but I think that this current situation has really more accelerated issues that were happening in our industry, particularly around retail. I think we've, as opposed to being a disruption, it's really simply, as I think Alan pointed out, accelerated some of the things that we were already involved with. We had changes in traffic within stores. We had the online versus in-store kinds of things. We've had curbside pickup. We had malls and the issues and challenges they faced. The department stores and how they are now reacting and changing to the market. I really believe the space that we're in today is accelerating all those things that were with us before. We certainly have some new challenges around safety and cleanliness and having people feeling comfortable and safe to get back into the stores. And I think that's also a real large issue. But I do believe that space is really simply accelerated way beyond what any of us would have really thought or imagined. I've been speaking to a number of different folks throughout the industry, and some of them have begun to sort of focus on a pre-vaccine and a post-vaccine kind of a strategy. I think for the next, I would assume at least a year, we are going to be in this sort of second phase, as Alan sort of described for us. And I think that will ebb and flow and change and adjust as we go through things. But I think you will see some folks really beginning to focus there, and then with the handoff or handshake to hopefully a more normal situation as we do get a vaccine to help us get through this real trying time.
Yeah, exactly. I was talking to a major retailer yesterday who brought up exactly what Mike's talking about a pre-vaccine contingency plan and a post-vaccine, and how dramatically different they are. The post-vaccine is back to having, school kids come into your retail establishment and do experimental logo drawing, back to, groups and groups of people, whereas now, everything that the branding's trying to do to get their message across is more of a personal, it's a personal journey through the store right now in the pre-vaccine world, where in the post-vaccine world, it's going to become more back to a group type journey. So Mike's right on with that.
Yeah. I think the one thing that kind of pops out to me is that no one really has any of the answers. I mean, we're in a place in a space that no one would have imagined. I don't think 3-4 months ago any of us would have even considered this discussion and this topic where we are today. So I think it's an important note to remember as we get back and begin a dialogue with one another, our customers, our prospects, and all the rest of that, is that everyone's looking for answers. We talked a little bit before the segment, Alan and I, and I think people are just longing to hear different perspectives, how people are looking at things, what challenges they have, because each retailer, each brand, I think, is faced with significantly different challenges. They're certainly not the same. Kroger is far different in their approach to things than an American Eagle might be. And I think those are some things that as supporters for and resources to the industry, we need to understand and be able to adjust and begin to look at each situation slightly differently.
Yeah, I agree. And each brand is, it's a different story for each brand, depending on what their area of expertise is, whether it's a QSR or retail. But one of the interesting things I found out about it, there are a handful of topics that, there's all these hundreds of topics, but there are a few that everybody seems to be focused on. We've seen a clear sheet everywhere. We were talking about that before this went live. There's a clear sheet. Holly Lane's on. She's like walking around with a clear sheet over her head all day long. So that's one of the things. And Mike, as Mike alluded to earlier, some of the things have just been sped up, 5 to 7 years. BOPUS curbside. Both of those were gaining incredible traction. BOPUS buy online, pick up in store, curbside pickup. Those were gaining incredible momentum prior to the pandemic, but they have just jumped to the forefront. Numbers of 210% increase in BOPUS in the last 3 months. Contactless transactions are something that you see everywhere with the Apple Pay or whatever that might be. And, we're a signage company at 3A. It's one of the things we specialize in the cleanliness. And retailers are looking at reevaluating their substrates based on what inherent performance values they have. And one of those that I was talking with that retailer is the cleanliness of a non-porous surface like a Sintra compared to something that they've used in the past. But it's amazing how some of these standard touch points have come through and been sped up, as Mike was alluding to earlier, way ahead of the trajectory that they were on. And unfortunately for some of the retailers that might be a little slow to react or a little clunky coming out of this, it's also speeding up the demise of, unfortunately, some of the retailers out there.
Yeah. Well, to your point, Alan, also, I think retailers have reprioritized, I think, a number of the things that they're looking at in their new world. And I think the cleanliness and those types of issues and trying to make things more approachable to folks to come in and feel safe is certainly skyrocketed to the top. But to that point also, I think retailers in a more traditional sense are reevaluating and looking at all their programs that they do. And really this situation has given us pause to just look at everything and see how does it really help the business? Is it moving it forward? Is it enhancing the brand? So with some of the folks I've spoken with, they're reevaluating programs. They're looking at, is there a different way to do it? Is there a more effective way to do it? Which I think is a unique time. It's a bit scary for some, I would say, but at the same time, I think it's a good time to be able to reach out to folks and to be sure that you're in that dialogue as they discuss those things. And quite honestly, the role that we all play, we need to be a trusted resource and a valued resource, bringing ideas to the table right now because there is so much in flux. And to do that, I think it's important to be engaged with those folks and to be a part of it. If you stay on the sidelines, I just think it'll be a very, very bad place to be right now. And I believe the customers are really, again, I think I mentioned it before, are really calling out for information, for resources, for ideas. What can we do? What ways, we're looking at some things we talked about. The durability of certain things now is much different. Microbial fabrics that reject things, covering materials because now we have to wash them all the time. There's so many things going on that maybe weren't part of the dialogue, and we need to make sure we're sitting at that table to have those discussions and to bring that information to the table.
Yeah, agree 100%. And to talk about how it can come together in a success story. I was lucky enough to be on a webinar last night with the lead designer for one of the retail brands, mall stores that's absolutely crushing it during this time. I had an opportunity to listen to him describe how they've been able to pull it together as a brand to make it successful and to ask him some questions. And it was really interesting that the first thing they asked him is, what's the biggest mistake that you're seeing out there that retailers are making during this time? And he said, it's what Mike just alluded to, afraid to act. The biggest mistake anybody can make right now, this is a chance to make a difference as a retailer, to establish yourself. He said, this is the time for action. And he went through and he described some of the things that they went back, as Mike was talking about, it's a brand experience. And they went back and completely reevaluated their brand experience of when you're going into the store. They kind of looked at it like a movie, a beginning, middle, and an end of that customer experience and what they have to offer now as a brand in this world compared to everything moving to curbside and online. And they came up with a few things. They made a bold decision to keep fitting rooms open. I've talked to retailers across the board that were like, no, we're getting rid of every fitting room. There's no way we're doing that. They deemed that as an essential part of what they have, a value that they have to offer to their customers. So they made the bold move to keep fitting rooms open and to rebrand. The number one buying factor right now is, does the customer feel safe in the store? And also from the brand's perspective, they want to make sure their employees are kept safe as well. And 93% of customers, as we're re-emerging, are expecting major changes from their brand to ensure their safety. And so what this retailer did is, they did the sanitation stations, the hand washing station, but right at the front of the door coming in from the mall and right before the fitting rooms and other place, they put up PVC signage right there that explain, okay, this is what we've done to change as a brand during the COVID. This is the change you're going to see in our store, what we've done to protect you. And then on the other side of the sign, they've got, and this is what we expect from you. Please wear a mask. Please practice social distancing. And they had an associate right there with them. But the basic point at the end that he came to is that it was a really clear, concise, direct message. They attacked it head on. And by the time the customer entered the store, they felt like the customer had a grasp of the situation and they were back into control of their shopping experience instead of, feeling like they were in a store that's reeling from a pandemic. They felt like they were in a store that's in total control of what's going on. And I found that fascinating, coming from one of the big winners out of this, that you'd be able to describe a winning strategy that retailers and PSPs can take moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to interject one quick question that came in. Actually, it's kind of a two-part question because I want to piggyback off of it a little bit. But the question as asked is, there are conversations about the COVID vaccine having the same effectiveness as influenza or as the flu vaccine. The debate is post-vaccine really a thing given the challenges that virus vaccines have? And does that really have any bearing on what our retail spaces are doing?
I'll jump in real quick on that. As the retailers I've talked to, there's a lot of unknown out there. There's talk, the talk of the second wave. There's talk, can you get it twice? There's talk about how effective the vaccine will be, herd immunity. So retailers, I think when Mike and I mentioned that there's a pre and post vaccine contingency plan, there's more than one contingency plan for that post vaccine world, where there is a contingency plan for a second wave, rolling restarts, rolling closures. For this 3 months, that's all retailers have been doing is contingency plan for contingency plan. So I guess the best way is nobody knows. This is all. It's why it's a novel coronavirus, because nobody knows what's going to happen. But there are within, what Mike and I talked about, pre and post vaccine plans. There are sub plans under those for each thing that can happen, within that.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I don't know that there is a specific answer that you can give, except that that's part of that next new, is that things are evolving each and every day. We're learning more things. I mean, early on there's still debate over face masks and things like that. The key is for retail to get back on its feet and to begin to move forward again. Having a safe environment is so crucial. And I think that the retailers that address it, that take a leadership position in it, and I mean, there's folks out there, you can agree or disagree, like the Costco's that have made a real stand on what they believe and how they're trying to protect their customers. And I think you're going to see more of that. I think the airlines had finally come around to that. You've seen some changes there. but really no simple, easy answer. You've got to stay tuned and listen to the people that know, the medical professionals and others, and we all need to be able to react to that, those situations.
Yeah, agreed. And then there's a liability factor, which I won't get into too much, but a pre and post vaccine liability factor. Two totally different areas that, retailers can look at with that as well. That's a whole nother webinar for a different day.
Yeah. And really kind of piggybacking off of that, safety from a different perspective, something that even I've seen myself is from that liability factor, the slip, trip, and fall based on having directional signs on the floor, things of that nature. Has that been a part of the conversation too, or are they looking for solutions for that?
Well, there's absolutely going to be solutions for that. And it goes back to failing. I don't want to use failing, but brands that are not doing so well throughout some of this are the ones that have been a little bit lazy and clunky and a little bit misguided. Have a sandwich shop that I go to all the time that I stopped going to since the pandemic started. And I just tried it again on Tuesday, and it's their reaction. It's nothing with the business, but it's their reaction to it and the amateur way that they've gone about handwriting signs, putting them up, putting food together. Like they're doing the app order food and they're putting it all together. So they're making it worse by everybody having to touch it. You have to look to see whose food's yours. I'm like, that's build a crate, do something different. So that's the best I can give. It's funny how the brands that are in the most trouble going into this are the ones that are the most afraid to act coming out of it. It's the opposite of what I thought. To me, if I'm a brand that was in some financial trouble heading into this, I would have been the aggressive one coming out. It's your chance to make a mark, but it doesn't appear to be happening that way. I'll let Mike run with it from there.
Yeah, I think additional to that, I think one of the things that we're finding is that people are beginning to come back out and starting that process. But I think some of the real successful retailers are realizing that time that people spend in the store is really going to change. I think in days past, we would hang, we would take time, we would spend time just looking and perusing. I think that's changing a good deal. And I think when you talk about leadership in the brands and retail space, the folks that are really attacking that and trying to make the flow of stores go well, directional signage. How do I get into the store and know exactly where I want to be? What part of the store? I don't need to be all over the store. I'm here for a couple of reasons, and I want to be able to get in and get out. I think there's some folks like the Targets of the world and others that have done a real nice job within the store. And I think some of that came before the COVID situation. But how do you navigate those stores so that you can get out and get in and get out, get what you need, and know where it is? And I've seen some folks really do some nice things in that space.
Awesome. Well, we have some questions pouring in here. So what I'd like to do, Alan, if there's something that you wanted to cover really quickly, I'd love to jump on a few of these questions after. If there's anything else that you have before we go into questions.
That's great. We'll go to questions. We were going to go to the third part about what the next new is. The interesting thing about that is nobody knows. How quickly are people going to go back to their old habits? So, we're social beings. How quickly are we going to go back to shaking hands? Are we going to go back to hugging? Or, how long until we go back to our old habits? Is all that, if you're in a corporate environment, how long is all that clear acrylic going to be sitting there? People aren't going to be put up with sitting in a conference room with, eventually we're going to tear that back out at some point. And then, I just wanted to stress BOPUS curbside. They are absolutely here to stay, and they're great branding opportunities for distributors and for printers. That whole environment, they're talking about turning that into theme park-like themes in those areas instead of being dull and kind of stale the way they are. So keep an eye on that. And then, the big thing is cleanliness. That's the thing that's going to be here to stay. We've all become that germaphobe. We all had that aunt or that a father or the friend that used to go around, and every time you pick up your glass, they'd be spraying the Lysol and wiping down, whatever you touch. We've all kind of become that way. That's going to be a lasting effect. And really, the final thing I want to say is the brands like Raising Cane's, American Eagle, Dollar Tree, the ones that are really winning, have an advanced signage campaign that's very clear, very concise. their brand messaging, their COVID messaging is leap years ahead of the other companies that are having some trouble. So clear and concise messaging is absolute paramount to the next phase. The next new, as Mike calls it, or the next normal.
Yeah, Michael, any final thoughts?
I think to touch on Alan's thing, well, I think one of the key things is that we do need to stay connected to all the people that are in our world, both our associates like this meeting today. We need to talk, we need to dialogue. I think it's important because there is just so much unknown, but there's a lot of really sharp and smart people out there. The clients are just clamoring for information and ideas and what are other people doing, and if we as resources to that community can be there for them and give them information, tell them some stories, I really think that's the opportunity that exists today as we kind of evolve through this process. It's going to be I think it's going to be a bit of a bumpy road, but we've got to take that initiative and that time to really spend with our customers so that they look at us as a trusted kind of partner, someone that they want to turn to because they've got ideas or thoughts and solutions that maybe hadn't occurred to them yet. So I would really stress that as a part of what we do. We have to give good information and important things that can help folks move their businesses forward in this really trying time.
That is fantastic. Fantastic insight. Well, we have a few minutes. We're going to go over a little bit, so I understand those of you that have joined us. If you need to drop off, I definitely understand, but I definitely want to take the opportunity to field some of these questions that we've gotten. So the first one here is really thinking about the retail sector. Based on what you've seen and heard, how much downsizing is anticipated to happen in that retail space?
Overall, in the retail space, I don't know that I call it downsizing. There's certainly going to be money that's just moving in different directions. So where one downsizes, another gains. So if you're looking at the overall, I don't see any downsizing. In fact, the GDP for retail growth, according to the NRF, next year in 2021, it's going to be a growth of 7.2%. Obviously going to be down this year, but a normal year is 2.5% growth. So we're going to see downsizing certainly, and we're going to see a lot of attrition because of what's going on. Like Mike has said, this has just accelerated everything. So depends on the industry. Hospitality might take airlines are going to take a harder hit than QSR. So it's overall the future looks bright, but there's going to be some movement around, some attrition, but then also some gains in other places.
Yes. Mike, anything?
Yeah, the only thing I could add to that is I do still see the online versus the in-store continuing to accelerate. You're going to see those changes, and I think it's the BOPUS, the curbside, those types of things that the retailers are going to need to continue to do to really address that and to try to keep people comfortable with the store concepts and being able to experience the more traditional retail experience. Mm-hmm. So I do see the growth of the e-commerce side exploding in light of this, though.
Yeah, and then where do they meet? That's going to be the great thing is where do they end up meeting to where it's perfect, and we're starting to find that out. They're getting closer where they're mutually beneficial. Instead of being adversaries, they're starting to become mutually beneficial where e-commerce needs brick and mortar needs e-commerce. Instead of being enemies, they're kind of finding a fun place to play together.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. One other question here. I think you kind of answered one of the other ones with that response. So when it comes to all the signage that's going up, you kind of alluded to this already, Alan, with all the signage that's going up, at what point and will this signage that can be recycled become more required by retailers? That makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to say more required, like from the government, like we're California in certain event type planning, or more like where they're going to specify. I think the question is more where are they going to specify sustainable type materials. And it's interesting. All the retailers, almost every major, I think Mike can attest, are reevaluating their substrates across the board for everything. For cleanability, also there's going to be, this is going to be a bumpy road for the next year. It's going to be a volatile road. So also for the sustainability side, a product like DISPA, there's going to be a lot of short-term signage. So the recyclability factor is going to come in really big, where basically that same sign recycles 3 or 4 times through. So retailers are taking a look and they're reevaluating, there are some places in an elevator, you're going to want something more non-porous, something more cleanable. But if you're looking at a vestibule area where they're going to do quick turns on whether it's COVID signage or anything else, then there's still going to be that specification on the retail side for sustainability. It'll still continue to grow.
That's awesome. Good deal. Michael?
Yeah, I think Alan's is right on the mark. That whole everyone's reevaluating everything. I think the circumstances and situations are changing. So certain items might be looked at today a little bit different than maybe just a few months ago. I do think that sustainability will continue its growth pattern that's happening in retail for I think many of the obvious reasons. But I think the durability will probably take maybe a front seat over the next probably 3 to 6 months as people sort out what that means in retail, when they sort out what cleaning means, and when we put up graphics, how do they hold up through those sort of new, more stringent processes that all the brands and retailers are implementing.
Yeah, exactly. And, the retailers talking about this, keeping their fitting rooms open. They're literally, before somebody, you see an associate before you go into the fitting room, and then they go in and they clean it right in front of you, including the sign that's there. And then after you leave, they come back in and they re-clean that same. So we're looking at a complete different situation than we had seen, like Mike had said, 3 or 4 months ago. We're seeing something that's getting cleaned every, 5 minutes now. Something's getting cleaned as opposed to once a week, if that.
Right. Well, fantastic. Well, I think we had them pouring in for a second here, and you're actually answering questions by talking through these points. One last question here, and I appreciate this one coming in here.
Last one's always the hardest.
Let's see how we can make this difficult for you. Now, the comment first is, I like what Alan mentioned, making curbside pickup into more of a theme park customer experience. Are there any ideas that you can share of new signage that create that fun experience?
There's nothing in the market yet. I know there are designers that I talk to all the time. That's where the idea comes from, where, these stale environments, BOPUS, the great thing about BOPUS versus curbside is curbside, you pull up, open your trunk, they put it in. Completely stale environment. They're going to start to opportunity to brand. But why retailers prefer BOPUS over curbside is they get you one to walk into the store, and then through branding and signage, they get the opportunity to upsell you or loyalty program you, something like that. So now we're looking at all these queues that are going on, whether it's in QSR or more waiting time, waiting outside now. So you have all these queue areas, or even in drive-throughs. There's multiple drive-throughs that are stale. All of those waiting areas, all of those times where people are now spending time that they never had spent time with before, they're talking about just branding the heck out of it. And I think that's great. That's what designers are just bombarding you with: upsell, loyalty programs, everything you can imagine, new products, everything you can look at. So that's a huge area for signage. The whole BOPUS, curbside, and that are areas that are real growth for signage.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what Alan said there, specifically to that particular space within retail, but I would just kind of harken back to some things that we brought up here today, which is for all of us to be able to bring, I think, new ideas and new solutions to the table in all regards, because everything is being looked at, in many cases, looked at significantly differently. So if there was ever a time that you wanted to be creative, if you wanted to show something new, to give someone an alternative way to look at a space within the store, or a way to represent or present something, I really believe, strangely enough, today is maybe as good a time as ever, because there's so much uncertainty and so many things are being reevaluated and relooked at. Also, you've got new people that are, unfortunately, in some cases, you've got new people coming into our space that, because of changes and furloughs and layoffs, maybe don't know as much. So the opportunity to get in front of new folks with great ideas and solutions, I think maybe presents itself today in a slightly different way than it did not that long ago.
Yeah, exactly right. Well said. This is a defining moment, for retail. There's going to be a COVID-24 or whatever down the road, and they're going to look back at what we've done during this phase is going to be the model. And that's what I find so exciting. This is going to be the model moving forward. And it's a great time, like Mike says. It's an opportunistic time.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, again, we did go over a little bit, but thank you to those that asked questions. Thank you to both you, Alan and Mike, for joining us today. I think I got a lot out of it, honestly. And for those of you that are still on and didn't get a chance to get maybe all your questions answered, by all means, please reach out to your 3A representative or salesperson in your area. You're also more than welcome to go to our website, 3acompositesusa.com. And from that website, learn more about our products, learn a little bit more about what we're doing, and find contact information for those, for your sales and reps for your area.